Hey YouTube, Andrew here. It's the morning of January 6th, 2018. I hope you're all doing well. I just had to share with you today a dream that I had last night. It was something I prayed about sharing. I wasn't sure if it was something I should share. Normally, I dream quite a bit as it is, but a lot of times I don't remember the dream or don't really feel like it has much significance. But last night, this dream just really shook me. It was very realistic. A lot of my dreams usually are, but this one had a lot to do with what seemed to be the rapture or the coming tribulation time. And I remembered a lot of it, pretty much the whole thing, as I woke up this morning. So I wrote as much of it down as I could remember, which I think I have most of it. But basically what had happened was I was with my family, I believe. I don't know where we were, but at some point I was outside and I started to notice that the stars in the sky and the planets and the things that you normally see that are relatively stationary, the moon travels slowly across the sky in the night, but things started to speed up and they started to kind of move in a circle. And it was getting faster and faster, almost like the axis of the earth had changed. Something was changing right before my very eyes. And then I noticed in the distance that there was this large, almost looked like a spaceship or something, and what it was doing was it was going across the different houses and scanning the doorposts, very similar to, it immediately made me think in the dream of the verses from Exodus 22, Exodus 12, verses 22 and 23, when the Israelites are told to paint their doorposts with the blood in order to have the Lord pass over and not send the destroyer into the houses. And that's immediately what I thought of, was that this thing, but it was not a good thing. It was scanning, almost looking for the opposite, possibly Satan's imposter, looking for his people, trying to figure out who the chosen ones are, something along those lines, and it was coming towards where we were. So I immediately, in the dream, I knew what was happening, or I had an idea of what this was. I knew it was not a good thing. Not a good thing in general for the world. I think in my mind I had the thought that the Lord is here, the time is ready. He's coming to take those who are watching away. So I immediately ran inside. I think I was outside by myself in the dream, and I told my mom, who is someone who has been watching as well. She's one of the only family members I have that takes a lot of this stuff seriously. But I told her what was going on, and as I was telling her, I noticed outside that something, the sun, or something that appeared to be the sun, was rising from the west. And in the dream I had to check my coordinates. I was like, am I seeing this wrong? And sure enough, no, it was coming out of the west, and I knew that it was not a good thing at all. I believe, I don't know where I have heard this. When I woke up, I'll get to the rest of the dream in a second, but to explain that point, I feel like somewhere I had read or heard that, the rise of the Antichrist. I think it was something I watched recently about the Google Doodle that was put up for Christmas into the new year. There have been a lot of weird ones going back into the fall of, showing things like mice collecting goods and going underground, and you kept seeing the Go and the GLE portion of Google, and then the second O would be some other object, and some people had said, maybe that's saying Go, underground, ground level event, GLE. It's possible, I don't know, but the most recent one showed a sequence very similar to that same type of thing. The mice, I believe, or in this case it was birds actually, which was interesting that they had switched it to birds, but the birds were packing, then they took a trip, got away from the cold, went into the warm. There were lights, which could have implied, Hanukkah, the Feast of Lights. Then they come back, and then they're shown on this hill, and once again we have the Go. The second O was a sun rising as they were watching it. It doesn't show where. It kind of looks more like a sunset than a sunrise, but it's a little ambiguous. And then, of course, the GLE thing at the end. So I don't know if it's related to that or not, but that's what my thought process was when we saw this. But in the dream, when I ran back inside, And I said, he's coming, you know. And immediately we threw up our hands into the air and we're just crying out, Lord, don't leave us here for this. Don't leave us here. And my mom came and gave me a big hug and was crying out as well. She knew. And it was a somewhat unsettling but also encouraging dream. I mean, you know, you can have dreams for a lot of reasons. It could have just been, you know, that I've been researching this stuff recently, so it was something that my brain was processing, or it could have been from the Lord. I don't know. I debated whether or not to even share it, because sometimes it, you know, it's important to think about and pray about these things. And I did pray a little bit about it, but I did feel like it was something that I wanted to share, possibly having to do with something happening like that very soon. But I did want to read too the parable of the virgins, because that was my other thought. You know, in the dream there were other people looking on, several family members. I don't know if they're believers or not. Some of them would say they are, but I think there's a lot of people that are not in tune with this at all, or not watching or looking for these things. And in the dream they were looking on with confusion, almost like, what are you looking at? Why are you doing this? Why are you responding this way? Like they almost like they couldn't see it. So the impression I was left with when I woke up was, this was something that only me and I guess my mom in the dream were able to see, and the other people that were looking on did not see it. And it just struck me as, my first thought was that the parable of the virgins, which I'll read to you right now. It's from Matthew 25, starting in verse 1. It says, Then shall the kingdom of heaven be likened unto 10 virgins, which took their lamps and went forth to meet the bridegroom. And 5 of them were wise, and 5 were foolish. They that were foolish took their lamps and took no oil with them, but the wise took oil in their vessels with their lamps. While the bridegroom tarried, they all slumbered and slept, all of them. And at midnight there was a cry made, Behold, the bridegroom comes, go out and meet him. Then all those virgins arose and trimmed their lamps, and the foolish said unto the wise, Give us your oil, for our lamps are gone out. But the wise answered, saying, Not so, lest there be not enough for us and you. But go rather to them that sell, and buy for yourselves. And while they went to buy, the bridegroom came, and they that were ready went in with him to the marriage, and the door was shut. Afterward came also the other virgins, saying, Lord, Lord, open to us. But he answered and said, Verily I say unto you, I do not know you. Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour wherein the Son of Man comes. So what I got from that in terms of this dream was, you know, it was only the 5 of the 10 virgins that had the oil and that were watching. And I've always wondered, you know, what is that midnight cry? And I feel like a lot of what we've seen over the past several months, you know, is at least a picture of that, or could be the cry itself. I mean, we're kind of just waiting on the edge now. And the way I interpreted that in my dream was, you know, there were signs that we were seeing. There was the rising of the strange sun-like object in the west, which is unusual. It's backwards. The spinning, the increasing spin of the stars and the planets in the sky. And then, of course, the large, unidentified flying object, literally a UFO of some sort, that was going and scanning all of the doorposts of the houses to see who everyone was and marking something. And in the dream, it's like putting the pieces together. It's like you had been following along. I had been following along and understood what was going on, but not everyone else either could see it or understood. And so we knew the time was ready. I did, and my mom did, and we just threw our hands up in the air. I was on my knees, I remember, just crying and pleading, Please don't leave me. I know you're coming now. Please take us. And, you know, I woke up shortly after that. I didn't see what happened after that point. But anyway, it just reminded me of this because, you know, it says at midnight, they all went to sleep. They all were sleeping at the time, but only the 5 had the oil. And when the midnight cry was made, they knew what was happening, these virgins, and they went and they responded, and the other 5 didn't, or they didn't have what was necessary to respond. They weren't prepared in some way. I don't know the full extent of this. You know, these parables, there's a lot of, I guess you could say, hidden meaning in them. And so I can't say for sure, I'm not a Bible scholar to understand exactly what that's saying, but that was the picture that I was left with. And it was an encouraging one and also a terrifying one, because the gravity of what was taking place in this dream was a terrible thing for those who were about to be left. And I realized myself, as did my mom in the dream, that if you don't take us, Lord, with what we can see happening, we are toast, basically. So it's a pretty serious thing, and I wanted this to be an encouragement. The reason why I'm posting this at all is that if you are among those who are watching and praying and looking in the Spirit of God, obviously not following after fables or false date setters, or there is a lot of that going on. I don't necessarily think, like I said in my last video, that every person doing this is a false prophet. I would encourage them not to be setting dates for rapture and things like that. We can speculate on possible events, we can see what's going on, but we really don't know the exact timing of this. But at the same time, if we're following along and we can put these pieces together, we are in a place where we will be able to hear that midnight cry and understand and not miss this, what's about to come. I really do believe it is very, very soon. We're seeing, we just had I forget what they call it, but it was a special type of full moon, and there's another one at the end of the month, a blue and a red, I believe, something like that. Oh, it was the wolf supermoon that just happened, and then there's another one coming up at the end of the month that they're calling a red blue moon or something like that, and it's the last in a sequence as well. And we're also approaching, depending on which calendar you use, I think this weekend is the Julian Christmas, and then coming up in early March, I think, is the beginning of the biblical New Year, based on what some people have put together. So however you want to look at it, we're in the final possibly days or even weeks or months of this particular season, the Jubilee year, if we have not already gotten to the end already or right at the end. Regardless, again, I don't know every detail about those different calendars and which one we should be looking at or anything like that, but I think we can see from what's happening in the world and the different signs that the Lord is giving for, I think it's for the wicked who can't even see it, but it's also for us to understand that He means business. The time is here and now. So that's about all I have. Be encouraged, because where I was going with that was not to be discouraged. I know that from day to day, despite my mistakes and things that I know are wrong, it's sometimes I feel like, am I wasting my time looking at this stuff? Is this just stupidity? And this sort of was an affirmation of, it's not, because this is really what we're called to do. This is what we're supposed to be doing. Like I just said in the end, I wish I hadn't closed my Bible, but in Matthew 25, at the end of that parable, when they're crying, the foolish virgins are crying out and saying, Lord, let us in. And He says, I don't even know you. At the very end, it says, watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour wherein the Son of Man comes. Why would we watch if we don't know the day or the hour anyway? I think a lot of people take that out of context, like we can't know pretty much anything, and we should just get on with our lives. And I think that's the exact opposite of what this parable is saying. It's saying to watch because you don't know the day or the hour, and the only way to even be close in identifying when it's at the door and when that midnight cry comes is if you're watching all along. If you're just not watching and not doing anything, then you're really not following God, is what this seems to be implying. Because if God's saying to them, I verily I say unto you, I don't know you, it sounds very similar to the other passage in the New Testament that says, they're crying out and saying, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? Did we not do good works? Did we not do all this stuff? And He says, depart from me, I never knew you, you workers of iniquity. I mean, that sounds very harsh, but that's the reality of what He's saying and what He's doing. And I believe that this parable ties into that as well. So keep on looking. I mean, if you're one of the few who is doing this, don't feel like a crazy person. I mean, obviously keep what you're doing within the confines of what Scripture says. We don't want to be extra biblical. We don't want to be making up dates, like I said, definitive dates for a rapture, because we can't know that moment. But I think we can get pretty darn close to when, and if we're watching, we can know what mindset we should be in, what we should be focused on, where we're at in this timeline. And so that's basically it. Be encouraged with this. I hope that this was encouraging to you. It's a little bit sobering when you think about, again, the other people in the dream that were just looking on, like, what's going on? Why are you reacting to this? I feel like that's going to be the reality when this event should come. And we don't have any control over that. People respond in accordance with how the Spirit of God moves them, how they respond to Him and the things that He provides. Everyone will be held to account. I mean, we can do our part in sharing and encouraging, but at some point, certain people just aren't going to listen. But that's a sobering thought, to think that in that moment, some of us are going to be departing and others will not. And we have to pray, of course, that we're worthy, that we're counted worthy. I mean, we're not anything special, but if we're following and obeying God and what He's shown us, then He's promised to deliver us from that hour of trial, unlike anything the world has ever seen. And like I said, I do believe it is very close, based on everything I've seen and watched and prayed about and read in the scriptures myself. So that's it. Be blessed, brothers and sisters. Have a great weekend. Stay in the Lord.